Test, test, test. Can you guys hear me in the back? A little bit louder, I think. We got a loud group. These guys are always fucking loud.
Every camp has a theme song that requires you sing along. The more we keep on drinking, the better we'll start singing. If you like to drink, wanna learn to fix your sink,
Seems like a functional thing.
wanna earn some badges and unite with other badges. Let's make a place that we belong and sing the campfire hoo-ha song.
We're going to camp.
Hoo-ha, 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 yeah! Going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 yeah! Going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 yeah! Going to camp, hoo-ha, hoo-ha.
Who are you? Are?
You want the fun that camp brings,
I do.
but you really fucking hate camping.
I do.
Can make a craft or have a beer.
Craft beer.
You'll learn some useful shit here. That's what I hear anyway. Let's make a place that we belong
And
join the campfire hoo-ha song.
we're going to camp.
Hoo-ha, 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 yeah! Going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 yeah! Going to camp, hoo-ha, me, hoo-ha, hoo-ha! Going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 hoo-ha.
That's 2 minutes. You were right. That's funny.
Okay. All right. Welcome, campers. Welcome to Space Camp. Are you guys excited? I am super excited. I am a little bit nervous. This is the first time in this capacity we are bringing a room this big full of campers and having them hoo-ha with a whole pile of campers at home. So this is super fun, super exciting, and I am so thrilled that we get to have Natalie share her presentation with tons of campers. So welcome to Camp Hoo-Ha. My name is Mel McKay. I am your high hoo-ha. We have some newbies in the room that already are wearing their Cock Rocket t-shirts, which tells me they are good campers ready to hoo-ha. So I'm going to tell you guys at home and you new campers in the room a little bit about the hoo-ha story, because some of you guys are probably still just figuring out what the hell this whole thing is. So Camp Hoo-Ha, I started in 2017. I'm a Sasky girl. Grew up in Saskatchewan, came to the big city in 1997, got into all sorts of trouble with your booze counselor, Carla, back in the day, fucked around for a lot of time, waitressing, doing all those crazy things, ended up working in advertising for several years, worked for myself up until 2017, and then like a lot of other women, I kind of hit a point where I was starting to feel kind of disappearing into the background, losing myself, not making any friends, and also my freelance work was kind of starting to dry up. So I did what a lot of us do. You panic, you lower your rates, you beg for work, you apply for jobs that are way below you, and none of those things seemed to be working. So I woke up one day and decided I was going to take control of my destiny in a way. And I just thought, well, I'm just going to start something new, start something fun. If it makes money, great. If it's just a fun side project, that's totally fine too. And I noticed that a lot of the things that many of us are attending is either you're talking about your kids, you're talking about your job, you're talking about your husband, you're talking about anything except just hanging out and making friends and having fun for yourself. So I thought I would try to create a space for something like that where it's just fun women. Let's just go have fun and focus on ourselves for a couple hours a week. I didn't know what that looked like at the time. That's what I wanted to do. And then I picked my daughter up from Brownies one day, and she came running out with her mitt full of badges. And then I had the light bulb moment, why isn't there this for grown-ass women? So I went home, and I just put on a sticky note, badges and booze. That was the idea, a place to go, learn cool shit, meet cool women, have fun, not talk about our jobs, not talk about our kids, and come together and have some fun, empower each other, and hold each other close when we need to. And we're holding each other really close tonight in this room. We have a big, full room. So welcome to camp. Welcome, you newbies. I hope you guys feel at home here. Be careful your benches tip so you saw your neighbors earlier. So I'm going to talk a little bit about space and try not to embarrass myself. I have a few little kind of tidbits to share. I was up late last night, kind of panicking about what I wanted to talk about, watching a whole lot of Natalie's videos and getting some insight into all of the amazing things that she has done. But one thing that I remember that, depending on your age, a lot of you might remember too. Like when we were kids, our world was like your playground, your friends, your family, whatever was on the TV, the news. But it was January 28th, 1982. We're sitting in that classroom in grade 4, grade 5. They wheel the big TV in, and that's when you know you're going to learn something cool. Something cool is coming into my world. And I remember watching that day unfold the way many of us did. And I remember watching the two women, Krista McAuliffe, and I got to check the name and make sure I don't screw up the name. Judith Resnick were the two women that boarded the Challenger that day. The Challenger that then exploded in front of the world to see, right? We're a bunch of fucking kids watching this happen in real time. But even as a kid that age, I was 9 or 10, I remember thinking, those women didn't go to space, but now I know they can. That's what I remember thinking back then, because back then, you either wanted to be Madonna or sell Mary Kay. There was another option. And I know that there is that saying that if you see it, you can be it. And that's a prime example of what that historic day or seeing those things does for us. And girls seeing what Natalie's doing is so amazing. And when I say you can see it, you can be it, I mean not me, because if you saw my grades in high school, that was not going to happen. So that was my early space kind of introduction. And then, you go through life and you kind of look up every once in a while, you kind of hear shit. But I was never a science nerd. I know many of you are just like fangirling over being here, and you guys know a lot more shit than me. But I kind of didn't really think about it other than reading my horoscopes. And then honestly, this summer, in the fog of the last 2 years, I see these James Webb photos get released. And I marveled in them. I was waiting for the next time one to come out. I was reading all the comments because the comments were more hilarious and interesting than the photos sometimes. It was so interesting watching other people experience these things and unravel them. And the way NASA was talking to us was a lot more interesting. So I became obsessed. And those of you who were following me on Instagram particularly, I was posting about this shit all summer long. And my friend Shelly, who has a cabin down the beach from me, we would be sitting by the fire, and they'd be like, oh, fuck, she's going to start talking about those pictures again. And I would clear the room. The campfire would end because of my boring space talk. But I loved it, and I was fascinated by it, and I just thought space camp has got to be a thing. And I don't know if these campers are going to be into it, but I'm going to make them be into it. So here you guys are. So the stars aligned. I emailed Natalie, who I thought was in Toronto, and I know she's like a big deal. Lynn Feist, who was on our stage for Friendship Camp, her son Ben Feist introduced me to Natalie or connected me or gave me her email, and I just kind of threw the email out. And Natalie's like, this is perfect. I just moved to Calgary. So that was so amazing to see unfold. And you guys were so excited when I posted about her. So we are thrilled to have Natalie here, who's going to talk about the work she's doing. Aside from all the work she's doing, as am I cutting out? Am I good? Am I good? We're good. The work she does in robotics in her field. She's going to talk a lot about some of the, is it Mars rover stuff? Is that, yeah? Okay, you're going to have to fact check me. She's also a huge advocate for women in tech. So I had watched some of her videos on that. And one of her videos, she talked about how we need to encourage women to become more brave and thrive in uncharted territory, which I think really resonated with me, not because I'm ever going to end up in that line of work, but I felt like that was such a compelling message for us in general. Like, we're not doing what Natalie's doing, but everybody is still chartering their own uncharted territory in their own lives. So take a piece of that tonight. Marvel at her story and all of the cool things she's going to share, but whether it's a new job, new relationships, whatever it is, like, we're all still trying to brave our own journeys that are different than everybody else's, but equally scary and tough to navigate. So before, Rick. Hi, Rick. So before we get our booze counselor up here, she's going to share some wine notes. This was part of our online events all through COVID, so we're going to get Carla up to do some booze notes. We have the J9 here to sing. She's got an original. J9's here to sing a song, but I know Natalie is going to talk. I think she's going to talk about some stuff about Mars. So I think that's really interesting because they're doing some work around sort of, can we put life on Mars? Is that possible? So I thought, well, if we can we fucking hoo-ha on Mars? So I did some research today. Again, you guys might want to fact check this. When I say research, this is like a 10-minute wiki thing, right? So here's what I discovered. There's some good news and some bad news. So Mars is terrestrial. Earth is terrestrial too. Same. We're good. Mars was historically wetter. There is nothing wrong with getting less wet over the years, right? I had to go there. Sorry. Knocked my tooth there. Sorry. I know my audience. Days and seasons on Mars are comparable to Earth. So if we went to Mars right now, it'd be pumpkin spice season there too. Soil. I wanted to know about soil because if we're going to hoo-ha on Mars, we're going to need to grow stuff, grapes. So it sounds like Martian soil is slightly alkaline, contains magnesium, sodium. This all sounds good. I was like, yeah, good. Potassium chloride. Similar to Earth, but it also contains salt perchlorate, which is toxic to humans. Boo. So we're just going to load up on Copper Moon for a ride to Mars, so we're good there. Also, Mars is oceanless. There's no water there, although I think they recently discovered that there's some sort of underground ice that is expected to be the size of Lake Superior. I don't know, maybe am I right? We're going to get to the truth on this stuff. So long story short, Hoo-ha Mars 2030. Let's do it, right? All right, Booze Counselor Carla, we need you up here, or we'll get J9 up first. You're busy, Carla. J9. Yeah. Oh, no, Carla. Get Carla up then. Okay, we need 1 second for our booze counselor. While we're waiting for her, I don't know what she's going to talk about. We've got a couple of different wines the campers are drinking here tonight. I posted about some of them. We normally have a pretty tight budget here at camp, I'm not going to lie. Carla enjoys really good wine. I said, let's get this beautiful Celeste. There was sort of a starry red wine. I said, let's get that one and then get something really cheap for white. So we're drinking Slovenian white wine tonight. Love you, Carla.
Yes, I am on a budget with her. There's no question. So actually, I was really excited when I was allowed to spend a few more dollars on that red. So if you haven't tried that red's got your starry nights. It's described as 875 meters above sea level, which is supposed to have the vine to the sky for your magical starry night experience. And I laughed because I was like, Mel, you're right. The jokes are really writing themselves tonight because Calgary, if anybody can recall, is a mountain city. We are 1,000 meters above sea level, so we're already closer to the stars than the wine you're drinking. So I needed to really make sure that we had you going to the moon and back tonight, so it is 14.5% alcohol. And it should take you to the moon and back if you tried that one. It'll give you all of your delicious purple lips, purple teeth, warm you up all the way in your spacesuit. And it's from Spain. So the grape in that one is Tempranillo, and it is a crianza. So that just means when you see that on a bottle, it has to be aged in its bottle for at least 12 months before they can release it. So yeah, that one was a bit of a step up. Those of you who ventured out to try the white, cheers to you guys. She absolutely butchered the sale of that one. And I think I heard some Slovakian comments. I heard it was called a Pinot Grigio. So yes, we did have to do a few corrections, but this is the Avia Sauvignon Blanc from Slovenia. It's absolutely delicious. If you drink Sauvignon Blanc, typically, you'll end up seeing a lot of New Zealand. You'll see that Marlborough region. If you can't escape that, talk to me right away. It is a problem if you cannot escape this region of Sauvignon Blanc. We need to expand that palate. It can be really grassy, really acidy, really that green burn in here. Yeah, so those of you who know that are off of it now know. So this one is not like that. This one is a bit more tropical. It's a bit more smooth. It's a lot more fun. It should have been a lot more fun. It's got a little bit of weight to it. So that one was fun. And then, oh shoot, I didn't bring it up here, but any of you, raise your hand if you're wearing a Cock Rocket t-shirt. Yes. So if you girls, if you have not seen the Cock Rocket shirts, stand up, you guys. These are amazing. Show them. So just so for fun tonight, Mel has no idea how much these cost. But I did get my Cock Rocket Magnum of Rosé for you. So if you didn't see that one, come see me at the back. That Cock Rocket Rosé bottle matches your Cock Rocket shirts better than anything I could find out there. Woohoo! So hope you enjoyed it. You'll always get good wine at camp as long as I'm in charge. So cheers.
All right, we got the J9. I've got to pull up a photo. You want me to pull it? You can start talking while I pull the photo up, right? Okay. Double-fisted. What a girl. We didn't have Jane Ann at camp last month, so we're missing her, especially this month. And so happy we have an original song. So much good material to work with, isn't there? Also, don't fact check my song. Yeah. Like right here. Right in my. You might have to move this. I'm really nervous. Like, I haven't done this in a million years. Okay. Science. Okay, so I brought a picture. So I had a science teacher in grade 7. This isn't what the picture is. In grade 7, my science teacher was Mr. Constantine, and he ate chalk. We'll never forget that in my entire life. In grade 8, my science teacher, she used to, instead of saying Uranus, she would say Uranus. And I'm like, you're just saying urine now, so it's still funny. And then, oh my God, what a dork. That is me at my grade 9. Look how much fucking makeup I'm wearing. I don't even wear that much makeup now. At my grade 9 grad with my science teacher, Mr. Svoboda. And actually, I should have taken a picture of the back of the photo too. It has his name and little hearts all around it because I was madly in love with him. And I thought he was my boyfriend. And he kept talking about this other girl all the time. She lived with him, I think. I don't know. But anyway, not important. So that was really the only thing I liked about science was Mr. Svoboda. So again, do not fact check my song, but I did write one for you. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope I remember it. Is that good? I'm just gonna have a sip of water. I'm really not. Obviously, if you've heard my other songs, the quick, easy joke would have been to write a song called Big Bang Me, but I didn't. I tried, actually, and I was like, it's not working. Because I kept going back to Bang Me, and I'm like, it's not a new song, it's a different song. So, anyway. When I was a young girl, I used to dream quite a lot about growing up and becoming a famous astronaut. So it should come as no surprise young me was best friends with you, because being a famous astronaut is what you wanted to. We played together all the time, our dreams we soared toward, rocketing to outer space, rocket ships made of cardboard. Then we started school, my dream began to regress, when the science teacher pulled down a chart and pointed to Uranus. You and the class just chuckled, but I laughed till my stomach broke. Uranus is up in outer space, there is no better joke. At recess you wanted to pretend we were working on the Canadarm, but I could not focus, Uranus had done me harm. I could have been famous if it wasn't for Uranus. I can't get Uranus off my mind. Say it with a straight face, Uranus is up in outer space. I'm gonna think that's funny for all time. Sorry, I know I'm gonna forget the lyrics if I don't have them. When we got to high school, you learned more about the universe, but I didn't, because for me, Uranus had been a curse. You were able to study and continue to do your thing, but I could not stop thinking about Uranus during the Big Bang. Elon wants to colonize Mars, and that'd be cool, I guess. But I'd much rather see Elon probe Uranus. Uranus is the best. Come on, where do I start? With all its methane gas, Uranus smells like farts. I could have been famous if it wasn't for Uranus. I can't get Uranus off my mind. I can't say it with a straight face. I see Uranus in outer space. I'm gonna think that's funny for all time.
I strolled our uni campus, totally obsessed, telling all the other students I can see Uranus. You asked me to give you your space. I said, sure, if you give me mine. But you should know in my space, I can see Uranus all the time. I did my doctorate about Uranus. My professor thought it was a loon. Meanwhile, you made the dean's list and traveled to the moon. So sure, you might be an astronaut and I might be a mess. But even with your spacesuit on, I can still see Uranus. I could have been famous if it wasn't for Uranus. I can't get Uranus off my mind. I can't say it with a straight face. I see Uranus in outer space. I'm gonna think that's funny for all time. Yeah, I'm gonna think that's funny for all time. And if you don't understand the fuss, just look up Uranus.
Did you learn anything?
It's probably all that true. And Natalie's like, oh, Jesus Christ, who gave that girl a microphone?
The best hits collection has got to come out soon. All right, we are going to bring up our camp counselor, Natalie Panic. I'm not going to do anything other than say that she is a big fucking deal. And I will let her tell you why. So without further ado, camp counselor Natalie.
I don't know if I can live up to that now. And I also don't know how you fit Canada Arm in those lyrics. That's pretty impressive. This is quite the space to be talking about all things space. I'm super stoked to be here, back out west, and tell you a little bit about my story, how I got where I am on the stage talking to you tonight, and then some of the really super rad projects I've got to work on over the years. So I didn't just move to Calgary. I grew up here, so it is home. Spent a ton of time outside when I was a kid with my family, with my two brothers, with my parents, down by the Crow's Nest Pass where my grandparents lived, and pretty much camped every weekend from May long to September long, I think. And just like the Saturdays and Sundays, got to be outside, chasing butterflies, appreciating wildlife, fly fishing, hiking, all the great stuff that lets you explore and wonder and dream when you're a kid. And that love of nature and adventure and being outside really... Oh no, the clicker's not working. This is definitely not rocket science. Dun, dun, dun. Look at that. Did you do that or did I? I think you did it. I might have had the magic touch there. Okay, so that love of being outside really stuck with me as I grew older. If I'm not working now, I'm probably outside in the mountains doing something. But what I loved most about camping when I was a kid, and what I still love most of all about being outside now, is when the sun sets and the stars come out to play, and you can just dream upwards and gaze. That was like perfect timing. Looking up, maybe seeing a shooting star, maybe see the International Space Station go by, just dreaming and wondering, and again, having awe for the world around us. And so I realized that I didn't want to be just exploring on Earth. I wanted to be exploring out there too. I wanted to be the captain of my own starship, like the USS Enterprise. Yeah, traveling to wild places that no one had been before with a crazy cool team of people, learning science and learning new things. But as I got a little bit older, I realized I probably wasn't going to be going to Starfleet Academy anytime soon, but maybe, just maybe, I could possibly one day be an astronaut for NASA or the Canadian Space Agency. So the thing about wanting to become an astronaut is that it's a really, really hard job to try and get, and not many people get to do it, especially if you're a Canadian.
And there's also no guidebook that's like, if you follow every single one of these steps, you are guaranteed to land this position. Does not work that way. There's lots of different ways you can become an astronaut. You can be an engineer or a doctor, a test pilot, even a nurse now, dentist, anything and everything, because all of those professions are needed in space. And so I kind of just decided I'm going to set this long-term goal of wanting to become an astronaut and try and figure out experiences and develop skills and anything that I could put in my pocket, build my toolkit that would one day maybe position me to have a chance at possibly going to space. And that is how I ended up at the company that I'm at now, called MDA Space, where I've worked for the last 13 years building space robots. Yeah, pretty awesome. So when I say space robots, I mean anything from the Canadarms, so robotic arms, to Mars rovers, to science instruments like LIDARs that are on spacecraft landing on asteroids, just all kinds of crazy nuts and wild things, and have gotten really, really lucky to work on some pretty cool projects over the years. So I'm just gonna have to keep looking over here because I don't know what the clear is doing. So MDA is the company that built the original Canadarm many, many decades ago. So the original Canadarm flew on the space shuttles, deploying payloads as you see in this picture. And then that technology advanced to Canadarm2, which is the robotic arm that is currently on the International Space Station. Let's go. It might feel like I need to point it in a better direction. Yeah, so Canadarm2, that was actually literally instrumental in building the entire International Space Station, and it's still in service today, doing repairs, helping move things around, helping with extravehicular activities where the astronauts are outside doing their jam and having a lot of fun. And then also the Dexter robot, which is like a two-armed handyman robot that also does super cool things in space. So that's where I'm at. That's the company I work for. We do a lot of cool things. And so I'm going to share 3 of my favorite projects that I've got to work on over the years, starting with one that's all about on-orbit robotic satellite servicing. Whew. Next slide. No. Next slide.
Bring your microphone up a bit. Sorry to do this gesture in here.
Okay, so I'm sure some of you in here, or most of you, have heard of space debris or space junk. So there is a ton of human-made crap that is orbiting around the Earth in a number of different orbits. And this could be anything from things that are the size of paint flecks to things that are the size of screwdrivers to entire satellites that are no longer working, just junk that's floating around in space. And so this is an artist's rendition of all of the debris that's orbiting around Earth. It's not true to size because they wouldn't be able to fit the scale of everything on the picture, but just to give you an idea of how much debris is floating out there. So when I first started at MDA, they had this really cool idea that was trying to take this robotic arm technology and use it to clean up some of the debris that is in space right now. And the debris that they were trying to clean up was focused on entire satellites that are no longer working. So out of curiosity, how many of you have checked the weather today? How many of you have watched TV in the last 2 weeks? How many of you have been on a plane in the last 6 months? How many of you have eaten food today? How many of you have used GPS in the last 3 weeks? Okay, so many things in our daily lives, whether indirectly or directly, are powered by satellites. These amazing devices that are orbiting Earth that could be the size of a shoebox to the size, literally, of a school bus. Now, the thing about satellites is that despite being really awesome because they're space things, they aren't designed to last forever. They have a finite life, a lot like our appliances or our cars. The thing is, here on Earth, if my car breaks down or I need to do an oil change, I can do it myself, or I can take it to a mechanic. If an appliance breaks down, I can try and fix it myself, or if it were me, I'd probably just take it apart to see all the inside pieces. A little bit besides the point. But that type of infrastructure to repair things exists on Earth, where you don't just have to throw things away. In outer space, it's not like I can just call up a space tow truck. Next slide. Thank you, Powerpuff Girls. Can't just call up a space tow truck or an orbital mechanic and say, hey, can you go fix my satellite that's broken down? That doesn't exist out there. So the idea is to build robotic arms that would actually go up on some sort of legit, real space tow truck, repair a satellite that's broken down, change out broken parts on it, or put new fuel or propellant into it if it's run out of propellant, so that it can be used again, so that we can turn it back into service, and it's like recycling that satellite instead of letting it become space junk, which is super awesome. Because right now, the paradigm of satellites and satellites orbiting Earth is that if they reach the end of their life or if they break down, they stay where they are. So if it's in a low enough orbit, eventually after many years, they'll deorbit and burn up in Earth's atmosphere. But if they're in a really high orbit, like a geo satellite, it would take thousands and thousands of years for it to deorbit into Earth's atmosphere. So those just stay up there. And sometimes they'll move them into what's called the ever ominous graveyard orbit, which is like temporarily moving them out of the way so that they can fill that space with a new working satellite. So it would be like moving a broken down car into a shoulder lane and then just leaving it there, which is crazy when you think about that here on Earth. Next slide. Awesome. So this is the idea of satellite servicing. So this super awesome silver shiny spacecraft on the left would be the space tow truck. It's got some super arms. Robotic arms on the front that are going to do repairs. And this gold one on the right has broken down and is in need of some serious help. This one launches to space with the robotic arms on it, goes and rendezvous and docks with the one that's broken down, and then they deploy these two robotic arms to go and do any repairs that need to be done to that spacecraft to make it usable again. See if I can slide. Yes. So whenever we're working on...
Let's switch it out and see if this one's going to be better.
Hey.
Is it all the way up?
Is that good? Can everybody hear me? Yeah. Okay, so usually this...
We're going to try this one again and have you come a little closer up.
Operational errors. Do you want me to keep the clicker in case it works? Check. Okay, so the really interesting thing about all of the projects that I've gotten to work on at MDA are that nobody has done them before. It's never been done in space. They're usually first of their kind, and so it's actually really, really hard, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. And so whenever we're working on these projects that also cost like millions and millions or even billions of dollars where things can go really wrong, we build lots of prototypes in our labs on the ground to do testing on early to give ourselves a nice warm fuzzy feeling that things are probably going to work on that one shot when the mission actually happens in space. So this is one of the robotic arms that we built in our lab in Toronto to help prove out the idea of on-orbit satellite servicing. So we built this robotic arm, did a ton of testing on it to try and do all of the tasks that a robotic arm would have to do to repair a satellite or refuel a satellite, which is really cool. And just to get into a little bit of the nerdy details about robotics, because it's kind of cool in my opinion, these robotic arms, like this one on the screen, works exactly like our arms. So I'm going to do a little demo here for you. So our arms, moving around, have shoulders, have elbows, have wrists. This robotic arm also has shoulder, an elbow, and a wrist. So its shoulder, oh no, I can't move to the screen. Its shoulder is this big block that's attached to the floor. So I can move my shoulder, pitching it up and down and yawing it right to left. So that's called 2 degrees of freedom. Way at the top of the picture, up in space there, is the elbow. So it can move like my elbow, pitching up and down. And then this big gnarly cluster of cables and all kinds of other crazy stuff is the wrist cluster. So just like my wrist, it can pitch up and down, it can yaw right or left, or it can roll. So that's 3 degrees of freedom. So this robotic arm is a 6 degree of freedom robotic arm. That's 2 at the base, 1 at the top at the elbow, and then 3 in the wrist. And then if I want to send a text message or grab a drink at the back of the room, I use my hands because they're dexterous and really good at doing those kinds of things. Robotic arms don't have hands. They have a thing called end effectors. I'm cutting out here, which is a really terrible name. They should have just called it a hand. But this big thing at the bottom of the robotic arm is its hand. So it can pick up tools and other things to carry it around. Should I try and go closer? Maybe I move too much. I should just not move at all. It does sound pretty good. I just need to stop moving. I'm trying to point at my photos too much. Oh wait, I lost my clicker. It probably will work less reliably now because I'm further away. So yeah, that's one of the prototypes we built, again, to give ourselves a nice warm, fuzzy feeling. Nope. Yeah. Do you want to switch slides while you're there? Slide switch, slide switch. Basically a glamour shot of our robotic arm, because yes. Okay, but...
We're going to try yellow, guys.
What?
There's 3 microphones here that we never have problems with, and all 3 of them are giving us grief.
We're going to try yellow. Hi. All right. I will stay to the left. Actually, this one sounds pretty good. Okay, so aside from it being a super awesome glamour shot, we were doing some testing in this photo. So this mock-up at the bottom, this like silver doghouse shaped thing with the valves on it, is us practicing actually refueling a satellite. So we're going to transfer fuel all along the black hoses on this arm, through the robotic arm and into the spacecraft that needs fuel so that it can work again. Super cool. Next slide. Awesome. And then a close-up shot of us gaining access to a valve on a satellite to refuel it. So if I were to pull up to a gas station to refill my car, I basically jump out, open the door to the gas tank, unscrew the cap, and then put the nozzle from the gas station into my car. Kind of same idea here. Instead of undoing the door, I have to clip a wire cable, and then instead of unscrewing the cap on my car, I have to unscrew a little nut that's on the top of the valve. And then basically the end of that tool is going to put fuel into the satellite. Next slide. So I worked on that project for probably 3 or 4 years when I first started at MDA, and then have worked on it on and off again for the last 13 years. Because as I said, most things we've done in space haven't been done before. And the really, really crazy thing about satellite servicing is that countries all over the world build their own satellites, and they don't like to share what their satellites look like with anybody else. It's intellectual property. And so we would be going up to space to repair and service satellites that first we have no idea what they even look like. So we have a pretty good guess at what their fuel valves look like, how things are positioned and oriented on the spacecraft, but we also have zero clue what the condition is of the spacecraft. So it could be really rusted out, can't even turn those nuts on the fuel valves to refuel them. So pretty wild thing to try and attempt. And then satellite servicing is just one aspect of this whole paradigm of on-orbit assembly, manufacturing, and servicing. So over the last few years, I've transitioned to a project where we're trying to actually assemble something in space using robotic arms instead of repairing it. So this is some imagery of a robotic arm that's putting together an antenna reflector on a satellite in space. So satellite providers can make a ton more money on communication satellites if these reflector dishes, kind of like an antenna dish that you would use for TV, are really big, like monster. But there's no room at the top of a rocket in the fairing for something of that size. So they can't launch something that big to make all the money that they want to make fully assembled. So the idea is to send it up in pieces, nice and compact on the spacecraft, and then the robotic arm would just put it together in space. Easy peasy. So again, has never been done before. So this is a project I'm currently working on, and it is a demo mission that'll probably launch in 2026 and see if it's even possible to make this happen. Yeah. So I might, in my talk, inject some maybe inspirational stuff along with all of this technical stuff. So when I first started at MDA, I actually had zero experience in robotics. I didn't study it in school. I didn't have any work experience in it, and I immediately felt like a fish out of water. I felt like I didn't know what I was doing, I didn't have the skills to contribute, and I shouldn't be there. And it took me a little while to realize that that situation of being outside of your comfort zone was really pretty cool, because I was surrounded by people who could teach me things I didn't know, and that is such a privileged position to be in. So if you can get past that initial vulnerability and fear of being in uncharted territories and outside of your comfort zone, it really is so incredibly rewarding. On to the Mars rover program. So while I was on and off working on that satellite servicing project, I got moved on to another project building a Mars rover, which is also really cool because not many people can say they've worked on something that is going to another planet. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with some of the rovers that are already on Mars. There's Spirit, there's Opportunity, there's Curiosity, there's Perseverance, and all of these rovers have been built by the United States. There's no rover on Mars that has been built by another country. So the rover that we worked on in Toronto is a European Space Agency robot. It is a rover that is also going to be exploring for life on Mars, and the part that we were building is the whole chassis and locomotion system. So that basically means this whole base of the rover with its legs, its wheels, all its motors, and basically everything it needs to drive around and do cool stuff. All of that built here in Canada. Next slide. Well, I'm just wondering if it'll spin. There might be a little play button at the bottom of that slide. Ah, yeehaw. Way cooler to see it spin. So I'm just going to put this clicker down because I'm not using it. Thank you. Okay, so if we watch it spin around, you can see that two wheels are always connected together through a center pivot. So there's two front wheels on the left. As we come around, that was nicely timed. There's two front wheels on the right connected at the center, and then there's two wheels at the back that are also connected at the center. And each of the two wheels basically pivot about that center like a teeter-totter. So the back ones move left and right, and then the front ones move back and forth, and that's how it drives around on the surface. This rover has solar cells on the top. That's how it is powered and how it is able to move around on the surface. The big tall mast on the top has cameras for its navigation, so it knows how and where to drive around. And then all of its science instruments where it's going to pick up soil samples and do cool things are basically inside the body of the rover. And then the other really neat aspect is this black box at the front is a drill that deploys and drills down 2 meters under the surface of Mars to collect soil samples, which are studied on board the rover.
So we can grow grapes.
Next slide. Okay, so that was an artist rendition of the rover as we were building it up, and then this is the actual legit rover that hopefully will one day go to Mars. So looks pretty similar. You can see that drill now has rotated vertical, solar cells deployed, our chassis and locomotion system on the side with the wheels. And here they're doing a lot of testing on the robot again. So as I mentioned, similar to satellite servicing, on any space project, you're always building prototypes and engineering models and things in advance where you basically do all kinds of testing to beat the crap out of it, try and make things fail, try and make things break, and make sure it breaks on the ground where you can fix it instead of in outer space where there is literally nothing you can do. This is like a small car. Yeah. Next slide. Okay, so close up of the wheel and one of the leg sections. So these wheels are actually a little bit deformable, so they're not super solid. They will bend as the rover's driving around on the surface. There is a motor in the center of the wheel that allows the wheel to rotate forwards and backwards. There is a wheel at the top, not a wheel, that would be weird, motor at the top of the leg that allows it to steer right or left because it needs to steer just like a normal car would. And then there's also a motor on the inside front edge of the leg here, which is how the rover deploys on the surface of Mars, which is really cool. So I kind of mentioned when I was talking about on-orbit assembly of that reflector that you don't have a lot of space at the top of a rocket when you launch things to space. So the rover, as you saw it on the previous slide, fully deployed, wouldn't fit in the top of the rocket. So it actually has to stow really compact in on itself for the launch into space, for the 9-month transit to Mars, for the entry, descent, and landing onto the surface. And then once it gets on the surface, if it survives all of that, then it has to fully deploy into the configuration it's going to be when it drives around. Next slide. So this is how it looks all compact and folded up. So yeah, those legs literally turn in on itself for launch and transit, and then they deploy for that fully deployed configuration where it drives around on the surface. So the really, really neat part about space stuff and what I love most and my favorite part of projects is when you get to do the actual testing of things and you're in labs and you're playing with hardware and you've got actual things to touch and do tests on. So when we test things for space, you always test in the order of the environments that it's going to see on its mission. So make sure that things don't come flying off or break. After it launches into space and it's in orbit, then it's going to start to see vacuum in space. It's going to be exposed to radiation. It's going to see extreme temperatures in space. And then once it gets to Mars, it's going to see loads as it's landing down on the surface. And then when it's on the surface of Mars, it's exposed to the overnight of that. So it'll come off of this vibration table and it'll go in a huge chamber that we can get down to really, really cold temperatures and get it up to really, really hot temperatures and see how it survives and performs under those conditions. So we literally call that the shake and bake of the spacecraft. We might send it to a facility where they'll like blow simulated Martian dust at it and try and get the dust in all the nooks and crannies of the rover and into our motors and see if the motors still work with the Martian dust on it. Just all kinds of crazy testing on these prototypes. You would never do that on the one that's actually going to space because it wouldn't work after, pretty much guaranteed. Just to make sure that it's going to work, which is really awesome. Next slide. And then another glamour shot, yes, of the rover in a facility in the UK, which is our customer who's doing the final integration of all the rover, with all of the engineers and scientists in their super, super good looking clean room attire. So this space is called a clean room, and it's filtering out all kinds of particulates to make sure that they're not getting any debris or anything else on sensitive components or optics that could jeopardize the science on the mission. And so to be in this space, everything has to be covered, that they're not actively testing. The folks are in their bunny suits with masks and gloves, and then people outside can watch what's happening on screens. And so someone asked if it was me in a picture a few slides ago with the robotic arm. That was also in a clean room in Toronto. It's just not as high class a clean room, so we don't have to be as fully suited up as the folks are in this picture. Next slide. Okay, this is really cool. This is a video. You might have to give it a go. So I talked about the motors on the rover that allow it to deploy once it's on the surface of Mars. So about 5 years into the development of this rover, our customer decided that they wanted a change in functionality of the rover, and they wanted it to be able to do something called wheel walking. So instead of just driving with all of the legs static, those motors that are used to deploy the rover can actually rotate slightly to help the rover inchworm if it's stuck in really deep soil. And this is pretty awesome because no other rover has ever had the capability to do this. And this was built by a Canadian company. Next slide. Yeah. I don't have to say anything else. Next slide. Okay, and then the last project I'll talk about tonight is kind of the future of space in Canada and where NASA is headed with their Artemis mission. So the Artemis mission is making headlines a little bit these days because NASA is trying to send their SLS, their Space Launch System, for its first uncrewed test flight with Orion. And the Artemis mission is basically a lunar space station that is a gateway to science and research on the moon as well as beyond, so like places on Mars. And so we have the International Space Station in low Earth orbit now with Canadarm2 and the Dexter robot on it. This Artemis mission would be a lunar gateway or a lunar outpost with a Canadarm3 on it. Yeah, which is really cool. And not just a Canadarm3, which is a larger robotic arm, but there's also a smaller robotic arm as well as a suite of tools. And doing very similar things to the robots on Space Station now, like moving modules around, helping astronauts out, doing inspections, doing repairs, capturing cargo modules that are coming up to Space Station. So Gateway is there on the left with one of the robotic arms deployed, and this is the Orion capsule, which is bringing hopefully crew one day to the space station and then down to the moon and beyond. So only the pictures I have here are all artist renditions because it's not at a point in the program where we actually have any real hardware yet. The development of Canadarm3 just recently kicked off. So usually when you are on engineering projects, you have a number of phases. You have that like upfront, literally brainstorming, pencil to paper, anything goes phase where you're coming up with your ideas of what your designs are gonna look like. Then you move into the, okay, let's crunch some numbers, do some math, do the analysis, run the simulations, and make sure our designs, at least on paper, look like they're actually gonna work. So that's kind of where we are on Canadarm3. And then you get to move into the, okay, now we can actually cut metal, build stuff, build our prototypes, start actually playing with things and testing it out and seeing if it's gonna work, which again is the best part of space programs. Next slide. And then another final artist rendition. So this is the Canadarm3, the larger arm, and then here the smaller arm is hanging off the end of that arm and using tools to do some of the work that it needs to do on Space Station. The one major difference between Canadarm3 and Canadarm2 is that it's designed to be fully autonomous, so it can operate on its own without a crew for extended periods of time. So using artificial intelligence to enable that autonomy, which is pretty cool. All right, so I started off talking about wanting to go to space. That was my dream. Spoiler alert, I'm not an astronaut. I'm just an aerospace engineer, but True. True. Next slide. Quickly changing the subject. So back in 2017, though, the Canadian Space Agency did put out a call for astronauts. So the Canadian Space Program is quite small. There's only been a handful of recruitments over the years, usually a decade apart. And so back in 2017, I was in my early 30s. Kind of the timing lined up for it to be actually a really good time for me to apply. I was in a really good spot in my career, had done a ton of outreach, had a pilot's license, just like all kinds of crazy fun stuff that I thought would put me in a pretty good running for this opportunity. So obviously I applied. So did 4,000 other people for 2 positions. So pretty stiff competition, and I went through this whole process and eventually got down into the top 100, which was super awesome. Yeah, and then I had a medical. It was like a day-long medical with military doctors at Downsview Airport in Toronto, and they did all kinds of crazy tests, and we had this big, long medical questionnaire that we had to fill out that we went through with a doctor at the end of the day. And I think one of the very last questions on the questionnaire was, do you have a skin disorder? And I said, yeah, I have this like streak of white hair I've had since I was 11. And then he wrote it down and took some notes. And then a month later, you can go to the next slide. It's not that bad. Well, maybe. There's the white hair. I got an email saying I'd been disqualified from the recruitment because of that white hair. And yeah. Yeah, that's pretty much how I felt. Would you be surprised if I said I wrote to people to try and protest? Okay, but understandably, they are trying to hire 2 very qualified people, and when you're in the top 100, they have a ton of qualified people, and they're just trying to rule them out any way they possibly can. So, yeah, kind of like in that moment, a goal that I had been chasing for 25 years was out the window, entirely out of my control, and there was nothing that I could do about it. And I can assure you I was crushed and absolutely heartbroken. And not only crushed and heartbroken because I felt like it was the biggest failure of my life and that I had been rejected, but also because I had a goal that I had been working to for so long, and suddenly I didn't have that anymore, which was really, really weird. So I thought I'd... Yes! So I thought I'd share with you kind of like the 3 takeaways that I had kind of in the year after that process. The first is that usually failure... You can if you want. Yeah, go for it. Yes, look at this slide. The first is that usually failure and rejection are never personal. It has to do with luck and circumstance and timing, and that is it. It has nothing to do with your capabilities or who you are as a person. And so never, never, never let failure stop you from going after things a second time or a third time or a fourth time. And if you are someone who succeeds on the first try, you're probably one of the lucky few. My career has been built on persevering and just going after things again and again and again, and that has worked out pretty well for me. So second takeaway is that it is perfectly okay to set really big goals and actually never get there. Most of my experiences, it's like the things I've learned along the way, having to problem solve along the way, having to pivot, having to improvise, make new decisions, and the people I've met that have mattered more than that big goal. But having that big goal was something really cool to work towards that pushed me and challenged me and moved me outside of my comfort zone. So again, set those big goals, and there's no shame if you never actually achieve them. It doesn't really matter. And then, yeah. Okay, so the point of the picture, though, is my third takeaway is that growing up, I always thought that success was moving up the ladder, like getting that promotion or moving to a higher position in a company, that kind of thing. And for me, I realized, next slide, that my career is more like this, like forwards, backwards, circling down the toilet, But the point is that it's always moving. You're always going somewhere. You're always trying new things. Always, again, going outside of your comfort zone and just trying to challenge yourself and putting yourself in positions to learn. And again, be surrounded by people who can teach you things you don't know, which is super awesome. So yeah, life is wild. You never know where it's going to take you, and just keep dreaming big, because it's also pretty awesome.
Well, I think a fun part of tonight will be a lot of Q&As. Like, I want to know about space drama. So I think we want to open up the floor to some questions for Natalie, if you're okay to, like, I'm sure we've got lots of, and don't, ask dumb questions. I'm always the first one to ask stupid questions. So Crystal's jumping out of her pants over there. What's that? What's Martian dust?
Like, basically like soil on the surface that's like floating around and flying around, like silica. Yeah. Like, if you've ever been like hiking on a trail that's really dusty and you step and it like poofs like icing sugar, I don't know, just like that. Martian dust.
Gina in the back.
What happens to your period in space? Okay, so the question was, what happens to your period in space? And I don't actually have a good answer for that. You're going to have to go to Google. People always ask me like space questions or questions about planets or like weather, and I'm like, I just build stuff that goes to space. Yeah, in front.
So how many prototypes do you build?
So the question is, how many prototypes do we build? And it really depends on the program and how we bid on it and how much money we have. So usually, space projects have usually 5 phases that are labeled phase A, phase B, phase C, D, and E. Super creative. And so we usually try and build models in phase B with like off-the-shelf parts and not necessarily representative of the final flight design, that just give us like really quick risk reduction opportunities to like retire things that we're most worried about. And then when you get into phase C, that's where you're actually building stuff that's pretty close to flight. So you have to build one model that is the model that, as I said, you test the crap out of. And that's the model that you use to verify to your customer that it is actually going to do what they want it to do. And then you build the version that's actually going to go to space. So usually minimum 3, probably a little more than that. And then usually what's going to space, there's multiple quantities of it. Yeah. And then you have to test those too. You just don't test it as rigorously as the one you prove your design on. Yeah.
What brought you from Toronto to Calgary?
What brought me from Toronto to Calgary? The honest answer is that I was in a decently bad mountain accident last September. Yeah. So I fell down part of a mountain, heli evac to trauma and a bunch of surgeries, and then was just recovering here for a while. And then I've wanted to move back for a really long time. So pandemic, that accident, things just, here I am. Yeah. Over here.
You said you had no robotics experience, so how did you get your awesome job?
So the question is, how did I get my awesome job without robotics experience? They were just looking for people at the time, and the other skills that I had and the extracurricular experiences that I had and ability to communicate, which is a really important part of my job as a systems engineer, just, yeah, kind of made that possible. I don't know who to go to. There's so many people. Way in the back.
What happened to Canadarm 1 and 2?
So Canadarm, the original Canadarm, which there were actually multiples of, because there were multiple space shuttles, they're all retired now, and in like museums or other things. And then Canadarm 2 is still active on space station. It does stuff all the time now. Yeah. Right here. Yeah.
You were showing the rover, the Mars rover, and how it was tested on the table for like the heavy vibrations and stuff. Do you also test it for how weightlessness, and if so, how?
not like the weightlessness aspect, not so much. We do put it in a vacuum chamber to see how things perform in the vacuum of space. You have to design to like different loads that the rover has to withstand, or we'll see when it's driving around. For the robotic arms that operate in orbits around Earth and are more in microgravity, we might build things like offloader systems that kind of take the weight off the arm, so it's almost like it doesn't have its own weight to counteract it. Or sometimes we'll write in our control algorithms or our software code that simulates microgravity, so it's kind of like compensating for it in the software and the control systems behind it. Yeah.
As you were talking, I just naturally assumed you guys worked with NASA, but then you talked about the UK. So who are you selling your products to?
Our customer for our products can be anyone. So we would bid on projects just like any company in any industry would. Yeah, so we are a private company, so some of our work is government contracted through the Canadian Space Agency. Some of our work is through the European Space Agency for DARPA, which is the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Some work for JAXA, which is Japanese Aerospace Agency. Yeah, we just bid on things. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
That was quick.
How many pieces would you say are floating around out there?
So the question is about the quantity of space junk that's floating around, and that really depends on what it is. So if we're talking like full satellites that are no longer operational, that's probably 2,000. If it's like size of paint flecks, millions. Things the size of screwdrivers, probably thousands. There's a ton. And how you would address the different sizes would need different types of technology. Like you wouldn't be able to use that robotic arm solution for this really, really small debris. Maybe you have a net or something crazy like that. Yeah.
So you said when you were a kid you would love to see the stars come out and so you could spot the International Space Station. How do you know it's going by? Yeah. Is there a way to tell?
Yeah, how do you spot
like that it's different from a satellite?
Easily, like visually, no. It's like using an app or like a website back then that would tell you, yeah, that it's going over.
And like, can you see it with the naked eye?
Yeah. It's just like any other satellite.
Yeah.
I don't know where to go to.
How many humans are up in space right now? You don't?
I actually don't know, to be honest. I'm not sure how many are on space station right now. Probably just a handful. Yeah.
So you spend millions of dollars and countless hours weeks and weekends. But then what is the expected lifespan of a rover under like perfect Mars conditions?
It really depends. Like it could land on the surface and not work at all, and then it's done. And then it could land on the surface and do its science mission, which could be a couple years. And then in the case of Spirit and Opportunity, they lasted much, much longer. So what I think is really interesting about that question, though, is kind of, and I'm going on a bit of a tangent here, tied to satellite servicing and space junk and the fact that we as humans do these cool things in space and put things on another planet in the name of science, but then we just leave them there at the end of life. And we are, in a way, just littering another planet. And that's an interesting topic to think about. Like, what makes us think that's acceptable in the name of learning and science? So, just...
Galaxy?
I missed the beginning of that.
I said, is Earth like the Kardashians of the
That might be a touch cynical, just like a little bit. Way at the back, against the wall.
Okay, could you just like, I mean, we just need to expand. So why do you believe that there are aliens?
So why do I believe there are aliens? First of all, do you guys believe there are aliens? Like space is just so vast, and I think it would, like talking about probability in science, be unrealistic to think that there's something not out there. And it doesn't have to look the same as us or take on the same basic constituents. What's the word I'm looking for? It doesn't have to be like us. Like, that's just one way of looking at it. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Why does space junk just fall out of the sky back to Earth?
So some of it does. If it's so there's different orbits. Like a low Earth orbit is usually up to like 400 to 600 kilometers altitude. So those ones will, under the pull of gravity, eventually circle back and burn up in Earth's atmosphere. But if it's something way out in a geo-orbit, which is like 35,000 kilometers out, it would just take thousands and thousands and thousands of years to ever come back. So they are trying to do things like active deorbiting. So the satellite would have technology on board so that they could actively try and accelerate that deorbit period and burn up in Earth's atmosphere faster, or like drag sails on the spacecraft. So people are working on ways that can help accelerate that and make that possible. But for the spacecraft and satellites that are further out, it's just not feasible. Yeah. Stacy? Yeah.
I have a two-parter. The first part is, so your company is bidding on projects. I was really curious about who decides the science that the rover is going to try to obtain when it's on Mars. And the second part of that is, if you were the one who got to decide what it was going to do, what's the question that you would want answered in the test that you would most want to see done?
Yeah. So first question is, who decides what science happens on board? And that would be like a long process with whatever organization is putting out the bid and all its scientists and engineers of what they want to study. And then, yeah, just a lengthy process where they debate and do trade studies and figure out like what would be the most reward for probably the least amount of money, or the easiest to do, or the less risky. And then the second part of the question is what I would want to do. Probably search for life. I think that's a really cool question that still has a lot to be answered and a lot of discovery behind it. Yeah. Here?
Is there any kind of governing body for what happens in space?
No governing body. So there's a body that basically looks after what can be launched into space and what orbits they go into, but there's nothing that dictates what happens at end of life or anything after that. The UN has guidelines for the peaceful use of outer space, and those guidelines are really, really old. And so on the topic of space debris, their guidelines are to try and mitigate the creation of future debris by making sure a satellite in a low orbit either deorbits in 25 years, or if it's in that higher geo orbit, that they move it out of the way. But yeah, nothing that would like ensure that there's a fine for people who don't clean up debris, or yeah, nothing like that. It's a little bit Wild West. Yeah, against the wall here.
Genius and or giant literary.
I think he's a white, privileged man who thinks he can do what he wants. So, and that's kind of related to the topic of like if anyone's regulating or anything that's happening in space. And so the big deal with his Starlink spacecraft and all of these satellite constellations that are going to provide space-based internet is that there really was no consultation with all of the stakeholders of space about what the consequences would be, just having those upfront conversations. It was just like, I have a lot of money, I'm going to launch these satellites, they meet the requirements of the FCC, so let's do this thing. And I think that's generally a problem with society, and that we're pretty reactive instead of proactive, and that's how we're in a situation we are with all kinds of space debris. And so that's why I love talking about it, kind of just getting it into people's minds and having conversations. And I do a lot of talks for young people, and this one group in Delaware saw a TED talk I gave, and then they literally did this, like, it was a Boys and Girls Club, did this project after school, creating their own idea of something that could clean up space debris, and it was called the OOFR, the Outer Orbit Finder Eco Recycler. Yeah, and they had this like trifold and all of these pictures, and this is the best part. It had a magnetic net called a magnet. Yes. To capture space debris, which was really cool. So it's like getting the word out there, having conversations, inspiring young people to work on things we know are hard, to get them inspired, and yeah. Yeah, a friend.
Which Star Trek character do you identify with?
Okay, the question is which Star Trek character I identify with most, and I'm gonna give you a Stargate character. Samantha Carter. Yeah. So Mel was talking about if you can see it, you can be it. I didn't have a lot of mentors growing up, and I think oftentimes we think of mentors as being real life people, but they can be fictional as well. She was this like super gnarly astrophysicist who was compassionate and thoughtful, and I just thought, man, I could be like her. Yeah. Yeah, here.
What's your take on the Black Knight satellite that they say is up there?
So the question was my take on the Black Knight satellite, and I have actually never heard of that, but I am going to Google it now. Yeah, at the back here.
So it might be a little similar to the Elon Musk question, but Jeff Bezos, Richard Branson, all those guys funding space tourism and going into space because they have nothing better to do with their money. Is there any benefit to that, or should they just reinvest their money on something other?
So the question was about all of the money that's being spent on private space and if there's any benefit into that. And yeah, for sure there's benefit. There's always really cool technology spin-offs that have usually a pretty positive outcome for the way we do things here on Earth. Getting private industry into doing space stuff is really good too. It's really challenging the bureaucracy of old space. The private-public partnerships are really cool in making stuff in space happen. So yeah. Not super awesome that we have all of these rich billionaires just doing what they want in space, again, like the Wild West, but good technology always comes out of advancements. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question. I didn't need to say that, sorry. If we can create all these things that we're sending to space, why can't we create the technology so that when they're finished, they come back?
Yeah, so you can, and some companies are trying to do that. It would be way too much money for it to come back in its entirety. Like they would always just bring it back to burn up in the atmosphere. It would never be something reusable, unless you're talking about like some of the reusable rockets that Elon Musk is developing, which is really cool. Everything costs money and time, and there's priority decisions about what gets invested and what R&D people do and what they pursue in space. Yeah, just like anything else. Yeah, on the end here.
What skill or experience would you say would be the most important to help you get the job you got today?
So the question was what skill or experience would be most important for where I am today and how I got the job that I'm at, and the truthful answer is probably how to communicate. So no, I do systems engineering on projects, and that basically means that I have to be the glue that holds the whole project together. So making sure all of the different engineering disciplines that work on our projects, like the mechanical engineers, controls engineers, electrical engineers, software engineers, thermal engineers, structural engineers who want to work in isolation and just on the tasks that they're working on, are talking to each other, communicating, making sure that the parts that they build when they come together are actually going to work. So communicating internally with our team, but also with our customer, being able to story tell, being able to be transparent and talk about risks and work through risk with them. So sure, the technical stuff is really important. I have a lot of technical oversight on programs, but if I can't communicate and make sure people on our teams are communicating, then we are busted. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you.
Since you were from Calgary and grew up in the education system here, I know I'm going home tonight to my 2 adolescent daughters. One who's academically skilled and is at Weber, and the other one is just finishing up her psychoeducational assessment, and we're waiting on the results.
And it's ADHD plus other things, I'm sure. What would be, first part of the question is, what was your educational journey to take you from, whether it be the public or private system here in Calgary, to where you ended up prior to getting your job? What was your journey? And then also, what would be your advice to students, those that are academic, but then those that are also not academic, that struggle and don't necessarily do not fit into the system as a typical student would be?
Okay, so the first question was about my educational journey. So I did mechanical engineering at the University of Calgary, and then did a master's degree at the University of Toronto in aerospace engineering, and then had a couple NASA internships along the way there. And then my advice, regardless what path you're going, is to try and get hands-on experience on extracurricular projects where like you get to fail all the time and have things go wrong all the time and have to troubleshoot that and work through problems. I joined a solar-powered car team when I was in university, so we built a solar car that we then drove across North America, and that was the coolest thing for me because it was literally a classroom outside of the city limits. Like, I love to learn, I love to read books, but actually having to apply that to something in the real world was just mind-blowing. It's like, okay, we're literally designing something from scratch that's gonna drive on a highway with transport trucks and roadkill and all kinds of other things. So yeah, just get like hands-on experience on projects. I think that's so much more valuable than reading textbooks.
Yeah, we have a question. We've had conversations, I know you were in Toronto before I moved back to Calgary. As moving back and you live on like, you know, this beautiful sort of outside the city area where I'm sure you've got mountain views and have all of the things, all of the natural kind of things closer to you. How has that sort of affected your perspective on your goals or your ambitions kind of moving forward, moving from Toronto to Calgary, or has it?
Okay, so the question was, do you want me to keep repeating the questions? I feel like that's a good thing to do. Yeah, okay. Yes. Oh yes, online thing.
Calgary from Toronto, which is a very like urban center, more urban than Calgary, like impacted your goals or where you want to kind of go?
So that question about moving from Toronto back to Calgary and how that has impacted my goals is really related to what I was saying about lateral success for me. So my success isn't vertical, it's lateral. It's extending out into a number of different areas. So that's doing very well in my career, but having opportunities to do outreach and having time to play in the mountains and be outside where I re-energize. And so that was an important piece that I was missing in Toronto. I still spent a lot of time outside, but it just wasn't the same. And so I'm kind of moving more into finding even more lateral success out here, which is what really means the most to me. Yeah.
This is a bit of a follow-up to Amber's question about like lead zones at all, but is there anything in their rocket design that is like, you know, from an engineering perspective more advantageous, or is it just
So the question is about the designs of spacecraft from some of the private industry endeavors these days, and the main difference with the SpaceX ones is the reusability. So instead of letting, like if you look at the old space shuttles with the solid rocket boosters that would come off the space shuttle and probably land back in the ocean or something, this is actually trying to reuse these spacecraft, so they'll have them come land back down at whatever their target site is, and then like that's always a good thing when you can recycle or reuse hardware. And then the other cool aspect is just like advancements in manufacturing and trying to make things cheaper that they're doing. So trying to do things faster, cheaper, more reliably. Yeah, those are the other big differences. Yeah. Over here. Yeah.
How many people work for your company, and have you worked with any astronauts?
How many people work for my company, and have I worked with any astronauts? So my company has multiple divisions. There's a division in Richmond, there's a division in Brampton just outside Toronto, there's a division in Montreal and Canada, all doing different things. I think us in Brampton are probably around 700 people now. We've really grown in the last couple of years. And then I don't do a lot of work with space stations, so haven't worked directly like training astronauts or doing anything, but have crossed paths with a number of them throughout the years. Yeah. Yeah.
So back to all your work, and you've had these like amazing projects that you've worked on. You mentioned there were phases like A through E, where you do all these demos to make sure it's going to be successful when you get it up in the air. So when you guys do an assessment, it's millions, like it's still millions of dollars all invested in each prototype that goes through. When a prototype goes through, you might not always be ready for the prototype to go through. So are you guys like making side bets on what's going to fail?
Do we make side bets on what's going to fail on our...
It's not like ready, right? It's prototype one. So you must know like there's certain things that are not like ready. So do you guys have conversation like you're ready, you got to test, you have to. Is there any like side?
Is there side? Are we side betting on space hardware? TBD. No. We definitely have a good idea of what we think is going to break, and it usually does end up breaking. Yeah.
Knowledgeable and like, you know what, odds are this will fail. Odds are.
Yeah, but that's exactly why you test it, right? It's like, have a pretty good idea that's going to break, like, let's figure it out. Or we're trying some, like, new technology that we've never flown before or hasn't been tested. So, like, testing always gets you past analysis paralysis, and that's, like, a surefire way to know if something's going to work. So, but testing is interesting, too, because it's also super expensive, because it takes a lot of time, takes a lot of people. You have paperwork for test procedures and reports. You have to pay for a facility. So it's, like, always trading off what you absolutely need to test and will give you confidence that things are going to work versus like cost and schedule on a program. Yay! Yeah.
Millions of dollars.
Here.
First of all, you were super amazing.
Oh, thank you.
How the goal, I guess, is for like a space shuttle to just burn up in the Earth's atmosphere. Because I thought it's really bad for Earth's atmosphere. Like, is that not a negative thing to do as well?
That's actually a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. I think like the biggest risk is if big pieces don't burn up and they land back on Earth, and like that happens sometimes, and that can be pretty scary. But yeah, I don't know the implications of that on the atmosphere. Yeah, good question though. Yeah.
Mel earlier had mentioned space drama, and I was just wondering if there was any sort of effective information, or you were very like you showed us pictures and things that you're working on. Are there people that come in and kind of try to steal that information and get first, or is it just kind of like everyone's working towards having the best things first?
That's a good question regarding the theft of information and companies trying to take other people's ideas or sabotage. Does that count as space drama? I'm going to sound so boring right now. I'm sure... I'm sure it does happen. I mean, companies take precautions to make sure you're working on like protected networks and not disclosing things, and all of the pictures that I showed are out in the public floating around already, so yeah. Question in the back.
I just want to know what your favorite like space event is, like your favorite meteor shower or whatever. What is your favorite one?
I love the Perseids. Gotta say, yes! Unite! I saw a hand back here, I thought. Yep.
Okay. Follow up to Leanne's follow-up question about my first question.
Bezos.
Bezos, did it need to look like a penis? Was there any reason? Yeah.
Privileged white men thinking they're funny. I don't know. But we have cock rockets, so yeah.
Is there like factions of your company that don't work on space?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, so I like preemptively answered that. So yes, we have other parts of our company that don't work on space robotics. So they could be doing like nuclear robotics or medical robotics. But we also have people in our company who aren't scientists and engineers or who don't do the robotics work. So like the comms, PR people, contract specialists, IP specialists, things like that. Yeah.
So did you always start with this company in the space kind of robotics section, or did you kind of work through all of robotics?
No, I kind of, the question was whether I started in space and stayed in space or moved through the other aspects of the company, and I kind of had tried to steer my career strictly space, because that's what I really love. Yeah. At the back of the room.
All right, give me a second. What are you most excited about on the space wagon in the future?
What am I most excited about?
What's coming that you're like, tell us secrets.
What's the secrets? Okay, well, like Artemis and the Lunar Gateway is a big deal, legit for sure. That's going to be a huge thing. James Webb and the Pillars of Creation image that just came out today. I don't know if anyone saw that. Like, that's super cool. But legit, like satellite servicing and cleaning up space junk is the coolest thing in the world to me. Like, we talk about, like, I grew up camping in Alberta where we were taught leave no trace, no impact, treat things with respect. And for me, outer space is just a different kind of wilderness. And the fact that we don't have that same mindset for space blows my mind. And so I'm really excited to try and get more people working in that space and trying, yes. Yeah, basically space sustainability. Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're very cool. And I don't know what most of the words that you're saying mean. My question is, do you work with lots of other women, or have you seen more women come into your job and that type of career since you started?
So the question is whether I have worked with lots of women and have seen other women come in throughout my career. So I'm probably going to give a long-winded answer to that question. So my company actually does a really good job employing a lot of women and other minorities. For whatever reason, a lot of those women in our company work on sustaining engineering for Canadarm2 and Dexter on the space station. And I kind of live in new projects and development programs, and for the majority of my career did not work with other women, and for the majority of my career have been mostly in meetings with men and on projects with just men. I have thought about that a lot, and I still don't know why that is at my organization. I remember going through engineering, and it was like 15% women at the University of Calgary, and I know a lot of institutions across the country and North America are getting those numbers up, and they kind of tout, oh, like we're at 30% undergrads now, and that's awesome, but I think it's actually a really narrow view at looking at the problem, because it's like how many women graduate from that program, how many of those women enter industry, how many people stay in industry after 5 years, how many people stay in industry after having children, how many move into board level, director level, management positions, et cetera, et cetera. So that's only one aspect of the problem, and it's how you fix all of the death by 1,000 cuts along the way. Yes. Woo. But I also have more to that question. So one of the most common questions I also get is how we inspire more women to go into science and engineering and tech, and my answer to that is 100% the wrong question, because girls and young women are already inspired. Like, we are here, we love this stuff, and it is, again, how do you stop them from being driven out by reasons and barriers that have no business being reasons and barriers? I feel like people are gonna clap. Hold on to that. One last thought. One other aspect of that is exposure to science and tech and mentors in these fields is often a privilege, and there's also a lot of young people who don't have that access. So it's bridging that gap also for people of color and other minorities who might not have the resources to see all of the things that you can be that people with privilege have access to. Now I'm done. There is a really, really awesome organization at the University of Calgary called Cyber Mentor that pairs women working in STEM with high school girls for like a year-long mentorship partnership. And you can donate to them through the University of Calgary. Yeah. Are you trying to...
Okay, we're going to take one more question and then we're going to wrap it up. I've got a couple of comments. If anybody has to go, badges are on your way out. We have macaroons from Costco. La Costco. So get a treat on your way out, get your badge. November 27th, we are back here for a afternoon charm camp. We're having a boozy high tea with a modern manners expert who's going to polish us up, get us ready for the holiday season so we're not we're not as abrasive and a little bit camper-like as we usually are. So I'll post details about that tomorrow. Those will go on sale on Tuesday. So Charm Camp, November 27th. So yeah, we'll take a couple more questions. And then if you guys need to go, get your badge, get your macaroon. Thank you, Natalie. She's a big fucking deal. And we're so lucky to have her. And I'm so glad we got the Q&As in. We got aliens we got to track down. Thank you, Rob, our producer. Thank you, Diana, Carla, J9, Jen, Kim, Diane, Karina. Thank you, everybody who came and helped. Sherry was here earlier, so thank you to Team Hoo-Ha. Thank you for your campers at home. I know we had some technical issues. This is going to take us some time to sort out how to do these hybrid things. I know you guys have enjoyed being a part of this, and hopefully we are going to keep doing these. We will keep doing these. So I'm going to pass it back to Natalie to take some more questions. And we'll see you at Charm Camp. You are now on the spot.
You did have a question.
I did, but
So the question is a positive experience with a woman in STEM in an older generation and a younger generation. So I've had so many positive experiences. One example with an older generation is a mentorship I did with Maurice Carmichael, who is the first woman commander of the Canadian Snowbirds. Yeah, so yeah, she's pretty awesome. And like that was cool just to hear her experiences and to be able to connect. And then with young women, so I created my social media and my Instagram account as a way for young people to reach out to me because I wish I could have just emailed an astronaut growing up. And so I get tons of cool young women messaging me and we'll have messages and conversations and yeah, it's just fun. Yeah. So So the question is if there's countries we won't work with, and I don't think so, but I can't answer that with certainty, actually. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah. I think we're good now.
Every camp has a theme song that requires you sing along. The more we keep on drinking, the better we'll start singing. If you like to drink, wanna learn to fix your sink,
Seems like a functional thing.
Wanna earn some badges and unite with other badges. Let's make a place that we belong. Sing the campfire hoo-ha song.
We're going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 yeah!
Going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 yeah!
We're going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 yeah!
Going to camp, hoo-ha, hoo-ha.
Who are you?
You want the fun that camp brings.
I do.
But you really fucking hate camping.
I do.
Can make a craft or have a beer.
Craft beer.
You'll learn some useful shit here. That's what I hear anyway. Let's make a place that we belong and join the campfire hoo-ha song.
We're going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 yeah!
Going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 yeah! Going to camp, hoo-ha, me, hoo-ha, hoo-ha! Going to camp, hoo-ha, 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 hoo-ha.
That's 2 minutes, you were right. That's funny.